Hollow Knight may very well be my favorite game of 2018. I'm aware the game has been around since early 2017, but I didn't really dive into it until the Switch release. It's a Metroidvania developed by Team Cherry and sits atop a throne I like to call hope for gaming. There are no paid DLCs, no unnecessary gimmicks, nothing obnoxious, there's not even any drama surrounding it. You play as a nameless knight, and you've dropped down into this bleak landscape with only a few tools at your disposal. Most people that have covered this game tend to mention it, but I feel like I need to of course touch on it as well, because it seems as though games are forgetting that this can be a good thing. It's simple. It's basic, it's easy to pick up, and it sets you out on your journey in a subtle way instead of stopping you constantly to tape your eyelids open while it slowly tells you that the jump button jumps. As you walk along the path in the beginning, you'll be forced to use your 4 basic movements in order to progress. You can walk, jump, attack, and heal. With some quick experimenting too, the game even offers ways to use its mechanics in order to aid in the others. The nail is your method of attacking, and it shines brightly because more often than not, just spamming the attack button will leave you open or positioned poorly. You have no method of defense early on other than offense. True, some attacks can be deflected with your nail swings, but these are precise, and just swinging wildly will often cause you to fail in a fight. The enemies are generally stacked with some sporadic movement as well, making it all the more necessary that you have an attack ready at a precise moment. Early on, the nail can only be swung in 4 directions on the ground or the air, but any attack that connects will push you slightly backwards. This can be helpful in order to distance yourself from an attack or to pogo across foes or obstacles. Healing is done by consuming a refilling resource known as soul. But the best way to acquire it is to attack foes. Instead of slashing grass or hoping for enemy drops, you're generally just forced to play the game a little more aggressively if you want to ironically play it a bit safer. This allows a simple action such as attack to carry more weight behind it without including more moves for the action. Whereas most games nowadays bombard you with tutorials or windows, the most you ever get from Hollow Knight is a simple and quick "got item" message that essentially tells you how to use the acquired move. These abilities you gain also refrain from getting too flashy. Basic things such as wall jumps, dashes, or double jumps, the most flashy probably being a ground pound of sorts or a large AoE above you. There's nothing that stops the flow of the game or hinders enemies' movements outside of recoil from the assault. The game actually allows you to play it instead of sitting next to you constantly being that asshole of a friend who would always go, "Wait, no, let me show you how to do this." Alongside the motif of allowing you to experience the game, it very rarely guides you on what to do next. This might be a deterrent for some, as it can be easy to get lost or miss something. But I think that's part of the charm. Very rarely nowadays do you actually get to explore things in video games. More often than not, you are pulled along by the game, constantly telling you where your next objective is. Sure, other games may allow you to traverse their world as you want, but will still remind you of your main goal. Until you progress further in the game, Hollow Knight doesn't give you that. You don't know who you are, you don't know where you came from, or what you're really doing. It's a game that lets you experience it yourself through, get this, the gameplay. Speaking of experiences, the only negatives I've ever really seen in regards to Hollow Knight is about its difficulty. To some, the game is just inaccessible due to their limited skills, poor reaction time, or inability to memorize pattern. A lot of games that are deemed difficult now are simply ones modeled off of the past, where games were generally all challenges. True, back then, some games were just designed to eat your quarters at arcades, but by that logic, you might figure that paying $20 is just $20 worth of quarters. With astute reaction time, nothing in the game will outright destroy you. Everything is telegraphed in some way, shape, or form. Not to mention, most normal foes only sport 1 or 2 attacks, while bosses can bump up to around 6. It's not a game that you'll get deathless first try. It tries to intimidate you with the sporadic movements or crazed enemies. Most bosses starting off with a scream to signify the magnitude of that battle. But the funny part is, it's just a mask. Hollow Knight is well aware that when you look past that and really get to know it, it's nothing. The game offers a Steal Soul mode because it knows after 1 playthrough, a lot of the things bosses or stages throw at you just won't affect you anymore. It's pretty funny because your first playthrough is on easy mode. People just want an easier mode. Especially in a game like Hollow Knight, where it's claimed there's no easy difficulty option, but the easier options lie within the game itself. The game offers you a multitude of optional power-ups in order to make the journey easier. Oftentimes, it is easy to miss them. I don't want to tell people how to play, but if a boss beats you down, I think it's silly to just give up instead of searching for a weakness either through patterns or power-ups. It's become a trend to call out games on their difficulty exclusivity. Keep in mind, I don't dislike easy modes, I think they're fine. Hell, I've used easy mode in several games, either to finish it faster to make a video, or to speedrun it. Shut up! But the games without set difficulty options all give you the tools to make the trip easier. Generally, the creators of the game have a set experience they want to give. The simple fact and argument for easy modes most times is just that developers didn't want to put it in. People seem to think that adding an easy mode to the game is as easy as selecting the option in a menu. More often than not, I just assume developers would rather just spend the time making the game they want to make rather than cater to someone that the game isn't designed for. Any time spent adding all the variables and options for an easy mode so that someone can bypass the challenge that you wanted to present to them is just better spent elsewhere. Some games are story games, some games are party games, and some games are challenges, akin to how not every movie should have comedic elements or something. Not every single game has to be accessible to everyone. I find it slightly hypocritical that the same people calling gamers entitled for wanting either specific characters or optional skimpy outfits in, say, a fighting game are the same ones acting as if they're entitled to easy modes. I've seen the argument, I bought the game, I should be able to experience the whole thing, which just makes me think that if you buy a TV, should you be able to watch it if you can't figure out how to use the remote? They give you the instructions just as these games give you power-ups. I do think it's silly to act as if you're part of some exclusive gamer club for beating these games and to mock those wanting to experience it differently, especially in single-player games. But if the developer has gone this long or made sequels without those options, they just don't want to add those options. They want to work on other things. If you don't like it, either don't play it or learn how to mod or cheat to make it accessible for you. I just know that as a creator, I have my series in mind. I'm aware of changes I could make in order to make it more liked by a larger amount of people, but then it's less my vision and more of theirs. Some devs just have a set story and experience they want told that won't be for everyone. But I digress. The thing I like most about Hollow Knight, which apparently seems to be becoming less and less of a staple in more modern games, is it's a finished game. Even without any of the DLC, the base game is chock full of content and will more than likely clock in over 20 hours for your first playthrough. This is one thing I don't understand about a lot of games. They seem to keep releasing bare-bones content at full price with the promise of free DLC down the line. As much as I loved Mario Tennis Aces or even Splatoon, I don't believe either game was worth $60 at launch. Now that all the DLC and stuff is out, sure, they're a lot better and worth the price. But I feel as though you should get your money's worth with the base game. Even more popular is to lock away endings or large portions of the game behind paid DLC, making it so that if you don't purchase season passes or the like to almost double the price of your purchase, you'll be left feeling unfulfilled. With modern games, it almost seems like it's normal to release an unfinished or buggy game. Just look at the mess that was Fallout 76. Even more major titles like Breath of the Wild can still feel a little underwhelming with its limited enemy types or dungeon designs. The paid DLC barely remedying that, just adding more of the same for the most part. But with Hollow Knight, each DLC was not only free, but would add new bosses, enemies, NPCs, and areas. The version that's out right now remains the same price and is stacked with content. Even when thrown into Gauntlet or Boss Rush DLC, you get a new take on old foes. A lot of indie devs tend to be inspired by classics because these developers are now essentially where the originals were back before gaming became so mainstream and profitable. You get a game with teams like this because they've played games and they know what it should entail. They want to recreate experiences before developers got greedy and realized they could exploit existing content. I'd like to think that I'd be able to get at least 30 minutes for every dollar spent on a game, an hour per dollar being ideal, but more often than not it seems as though I'm paying $5 for that and $55 for the graphics or cinematic experience. Luckily, that isn't an issue here, as my first playthrough clocked in around 60 hours before reloading the save to polish off the rest of the collectibles and start up the DLC. Hollow Knight to me seems as though it could be rather timeless. When a game focuses so much on realism, it tends to solidify itself in a present state. The further technology advances, the more obscure and uncanny realistic graphics get. But with a stylistic choice, a game is allowed to age. The graphics can enter new genres and become retro or classic, instead of just awkward. The limited designs allow your imagination to take roots and help nurture what you see. Groundbreaking realistic designs in present day become stale or a laughingstock with time. Hollow Knight's style is simple and complicated. Most of the characters in-game rarely sport more than 3 or 4 colors, all on the cooler side of the color spectrum, which causes the bright and foreboding orange of the in-game plague simply known as the Infection to stand out that much more and give an intimidating and almost alien presence. The game is rather dim, but this allows the brighter and more colorful areas to really stand out. Backgrounds or environments normally consist of a single color spectrum and are generally animated at a smoother rate than your character or the NPCs, causing them to jump out a little better. That's not to say the backgrounds are bland or anything too. They generally give the illusion of depth, oftentimes showing large spaces behind your playing field, allowing you to ponder just what might be happening back there, as opposed to say New Super Mario Bros., which oftentimes will just use a repeating texture on a very flat surface directly behind your play space. I don't believe that Team Cherry got lucky with Hollow Knight. I think they were simply rewarded for their knowledge and understanding of video games. True, video games have become mainstream, and there are all sorts of types now. I understand I'm not the clientele for most games nowadays, but it's wonderful knowing that the charm of what made so many classics what they are is still floating around. I cannot wait for Silksong and any other projects Team Cherry might have in the future, and especially after visiting PAX East 2, I have high hopes for a multitude of indie devs. Maybe AAA games will continue to mold into more corporate projects rather than not. But hopefully these guys can pick up the slack.